We're privileged enough to have Carlos Coelho presenting to us. He's a full professor of statistics at the Mathematics Department of Nova School of Science and Technology at Nova University in Lisbon. He holds a PhD in biostatistics from the University of Michigan, Ann Arbor in the United States, where he was a Fulbright scholar. His main area of research is multivariate analysis, namely the development of LRTs for elaborate covariant structures and MANOVA models with elaborate covariant structures. Other areas of interest are tests for high dimensionality situations and the application of multivariate analysis techniques to statistical disclosure control problems. Carlos served as an associate editor for a number of journals and currently serves on the editorial boards of the Journal of Statistical Theory and Practice and the American Journal of Mathematical and Management Sciences. He was also an associate editor of the Springer book series, Emerging Topics in Statistics and Biostatistics, and he currently serves as president of the Portuguese Fulbright Alumni Association. He will be presenting a talk on an outlier test for the high dimensional case. Thank you very much, Carlos. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Cassie, and thank you very much for a nice presentation. Okay, so as it was said, I will be showing you how we can use, which is actually a likelihood ratio test for the ANOVA case. How can we use it as a test for outliers? So this is more or less an abstract for my presentation. And so I'll be showing you at first the test that was actually developed as being a one-way ANOVA test, and that we'll be using it for an outlier test. And we can do so because the test that I'm going to show you is a test that is admitting samples of size just 1. And so because of that, it will be very much adequate, as we'll see later, to carry out outlier tests. Then we'll be comparing it with the Dulux outlier test, which is a rather well-known one, and it is a very nice one for the non-high dimensional case. And so in that case, we'll be comparing the two tests to see how well the test that I'm proposing here will be working. And then we'll show some applications of it in the high dimensional case. Okay, so let me start with the likelihood ratio test for the one case ANOVA, where we'll be assuming that the covariance matrices, they are circular. In a moment, I'll be showing better what is it, a circular covariance matrix. But so the initial setup of the test, it is one like this. We just have Q populations. And so from now on, Q will be the number of populations, or otherwise the number of samples we just have. P will be the number of variables, and N will be the overall sample size. And so we just have Q populations. We are assuming them to be normal, and we'll be assuming that sigma is a circular matrix. As I said, in a while, I'll be showing you better what is a circular matrix. And then we are interested in really testing this null hypothesis here. That is the hypothesis of equality of the mean vectors of the xk vectors. In all these sample size of each xk, it will be nk, and so the overall sample size, it will be n. Okay, in this situation, it is shown in this publication here. In the following slide, we will see the full reference. It can be shown that the likelihood ratio statistic for the test to H null, it may be written in this way. It doesn't matter much. Of course, you are not going to fix all this stuff about the notation. But anyway, I sent a copy of my slides, and you can use it. I think you may have it available for you. But so this Vj star and Vj double star are defined in this way, where these Ajj and these Cjj stars are the diagonal elements of these A star and C star matrices, where this U matrix, it is an orthogonal matrix, a square orthogonal matrix with elements defined in this way, and where these A and B matrices are common within and between sum of squares, sum of squares and sum of products matrices, where these AK are actually the numerators of the sample covariance matrices, and these XK are sample mean vectors for each one of the samples, and this X bar is the overall mean vector, the overall sample mean vector. Okay, that reference up there, it is this one. This is a chapter in a book from Springer where the full development of the test is really described there. Okay, and so we can show then that the exact distribution of lambda, it is the same as this ST stands for stochastically equivalent or stochastically distributed as. And so my lambda, our lambda, it has the same distribution as a product of independent beta random variables, where these Y1 and Y2 are distributed as this beta here, with parameters being n minus q over 2 and q minus 1 over 2, and these Yj star are distributed in this way as beta random variables with n minus q and q minus 1 parameters there. This n is the floor of P over 2. Okay? And so one very nice thing we can see from here, it is that to really carry out the test, we just need these beta random variables to be well defined. And you can see that they are well defined as long as the parameters are really positive. And so that happens if n is larger than q. It means if the overall sample size is larger than the number of populations, or if you want the number of samples. And so that means we can use the test in the high dimensional case. And by high dimensional case, I mean situations where sample size n is smaller than p, the number of variables. And so if I just need n larger than q, it means that actually I may have all samples with size just 1, as long as one of those samples has size at least 2. And so in that situation, I would have n larger than q, and we can carry on the test. Okay? So just a small side note, what is it, a circular covariance matrix? It is a matrix that has structure similar to one of these. This is on the left a circular matrix for P equals 6, for 6 variables, and on the right-hand side for 7 variables. And you can see that those are matrices that formally they are defined by a running element defined up here. This is sigma I mod ILP. But if you look at the structure there, it is a bit easier maybe. And so all the diagonal elements are the same. All the second diagonals, they are similar, and they are say mirrored here. And so this one, it is the same as that one, and it goes on like that, and then it is repeating again. It may look like as being at first a rather limitative structure for a covariance matrix, but it happens that it is rather close to the usual, the free positive definite covariance matrix, because what happens it is that actually the likelihood ratio test to test between the circular structure and the usual open positive definite one, the power of the test is rather slim. What means that in terms of likelihood ratio testing, the two structures are quite similar actually. So by using the distribution up there, just let me go back a little bit. By using the distribution here in 2, we can write down easily the characteristic function of the negative logarithm of lambda, which I'll be calling W. And so we can write it easily going through the usual definition. And so this is minus log lambda. And so we can write it in this way. these are all independent bit random variables. We can easily write down the moment of order minus IT, and so it really comes out in this form, the characteristic function for them. Because of this form, we can show that for odd Q, we can get the exact distribution of lambda in a very sharp and closed form, without any undefined integrals and without any series. It is in a finite closed form. And for even Q, we can get a very sharp approximation that we call near exact. I'll be showing it very quickly in a while. That is an approximation where we keep most of the distribution untouched, exactly this part here, and then we just approximate the other part, this one here, by an asymptotic result, in such a way that at the very end, we can get the two results together and get a manageable distribution, a manageable form for the PDF and the CDF. And so the aim is to really be able to just obtain in an easy and sharp way the quantiles and the p-values for the test. So for odd Q, going really through it very quickly, for odd Q, we can rewrite the characteristic function of W in this way, which is actually the product of characteristic functions of gamma distributions. This is lambda for the gamma, this is my R. And so these are actually, these RL, they are integer parameters. I don't have the expression here. It is in that reference I just mentioned. And what happens, it shows that W has the same distribution as a sum of Q minus 1 independent gamma random variables with integer shape parameters there. And that is what we call a generalized integer gamma distribution for our W, which for lambda is what we call an exponentiated generalized integer gamma distribution. The RLs are here, and so they are all integer, all these shape parameters there. And so the PDF and CDF that are denoted there by this notation, they are actually, or they may be written easily in a finite form. Let me show you very quickly what are these, the generalized integer gamma and the exponentiated generalized integer gamma distributions. A generalized integer gamma distribution is the distribution of the sum of independent gamma random variables, all with integer shape parameters there. And so we just denote the PDF of a common gamma in this way. And so the PDF for sum of this xj will be given by this expression where all this is finite. All summations are finite, all the products are finite. The Pj and Pj star are the polynomials in this following slide. And so what matters it is you can see that everything is finite, and it is rather easy to really compute such a distribution using a symbolic software like, for example, Mathematica, but also even in R, it is really possible to really compute this in a very sharp way. Okay, then if for W we get a generalized integer gamma distribution, so for our lambda that will be here denoted by Z in a general framework, but it will be our lambda, the exponential of minus W, then we can get by the transformation, we can just get the PDF and CDF of Z, which should be our lambda actually in this form. And so this is just a common transformation from the generalized integer gamma distribution. For even Q, that is what I said a while ago, we can rewrite the characteristic function of W in this way. And so we can see that this second part, it is again a generalized integer gamma distribution. And this first part, we will approximate it actually by a mixture of two gamma distributions. We'll be getting the parameters of the mixture by equating the moments. It means that the approximation will have at least the same 4 initial moments as the exact distribution. And so we can do it, we can go through the process that finally we get as an approximation for the characteristic function of W. This mixture here, that is actually a mixture of sums of a generalized integer gamma distribution with one gamma distribution where the parameter up there maybe not an integer. It is either an integer or an integer defined by 2, just like 5/2, 7/2, and sometimes it may be an integer really. But so what happens it is that this is what we call a generalized near integer gamma distribution. And so just let me show you very quickly what is it. This distribution is a sum of 2 independent random variables, one of them with a generalized integer gamma distribution, this one, and the other one with the gamma distribution, where now this R is not necessarily an integer. And so the PDF and CDF may be written like this. Everything is in a finite form, only it happens that this 1f1 is the Kummer-confluent hypergeometric function, which is an hypergeometric function, but it is easy to really compute it in a very sharp and very quick form using, for example, Mathematica. And also nowadays I got an implementation for it in R that can use extended precision, and it works very well and very quick. So with this, we can compute easily the quantiles and the p-values of lambda, which is what matters if really we just don't really get a test using lambda. Also, it happens that it is quite nice that we can get an asymptotic distribution for lambda in this form here. That is a normal, standard normal distribution. And so the parameters there, they are exactly these here. And so mu is the expected value of yj, where yj is the negative logarithm of this yj star that we saw back there, this yj and yj star that we saw, let me go up, that we saw here in this expression, in this one here, this yj and yj star. If we get the negative logarithm of them, we call them yj, and so they are yj's there. And so this mu and this mu star are these values, the expected value of yj and the expected value of yj star. They are expressed in terms of the psi function. The psi function is the derivative of the logarithm of the gamma function, and it is implemented in most softwares nowadays. Also, sigma 2 and sigma star 2 are the variances of the yj, of the wj, and of the wj star. And so we can show that for lambda, we get this asymptotic distribution, which is asymptotic for p, which is a very nice thing. It means it is asymptotic for a growing number of variables, but for any n, it means for any sample size, it doesn't matter how small n is, the result is good as long as p, the number of variables, is large enough. Okay, the proof is very simple. It really relies on the fact that we can easily get a value for these limits, and we can show that this limit is actually 0, and this limit is actually the limit of what is really called the Lindbergh-Feller or the Lindbergh, or even the Lyapunov conditions for the convergence in terms of central limit theorem, because this is what I'm using. I am using a central limit theorem for random variables that are independent, but are not equally distributed. But in that case, you should assure that the Lyapunov, or otherwise sometimes it is also called Lindbergh-Feller conditions, they are met, and they are met if a limit of this type is equal to 0. And so this is exactly a similar limit to the one that appears in the statement of the result. And so we get a nice a nice asymptotic normal distribution. It is one other way in which we can get the quantiles and the p-values. Or yet, one further way, it is we can actually invert the characteristic function of W. We can invert it numerically, for example, using what is the so-called FT algorithm or the FT module or the FT package that is done in Mathematica by these authors, Abad and Falco, and it is really published in this paper here. Okay, and so we get several different ways. We get the exact distribution for odd Q. We get the near exact one for even Q. We get the asymptotic normal, or otherwise we can even use the numerical inversion of the characteristic function of W and get the p-values for W very easily, and then by doing the transformation, the p-values for lambda. Okay, so we are in business, and you can easily use this test. And then we may think about using it for a test of outliers, but we should be a little bit cautious, because at first we may think, okay, we get in one set of observations that I'm not really testing for outliers, and in the other set, we can get a set of observations that I'm really testing for outliers. And then what I'm doing, it is really carrying out a test of difference of means, because that is what really matters. The outliers are the observations for which their values or their mean values are outside of the cloud of points. But well, there is a problem with that. It is, and what about if I have, for example, only two possible outliers that I'm really going to test for outliers, but one of them is on one side of the cloud of points, and the other one is on the opposite side of the cloud of points. What can I do then? And so the answer is, okay, there is a problem if I put the two observations that I'm really testing for outliers, if I put them in a single set of observations. That will be a problem, because then their average may be equal to the average of the overall cloud of points. But I'll be doing well if I set the overall cloud of points that I'm not testing for outliers in one set, and then each one of the observations that I'm going to test for outliers in a different set as being a different sample. And I can do that with the test that I'm showing here, because the test is admitting samples of size just one. And it is exactly using the property of the test that is accepting samples of size just one that we can carry out the test for outliers in this way. Okay? And so that is what is written there. And so then I get, if I'm doing a test for K observations as being tested as being outliers, then I get K plus one samples. I get one sample for each one of the points that I'm testing for outliers, and one for the other set, say the remaining points in the cloud. And so we'll be testing a null hypothesis just like this one here. I'll be testing observations, say N1 through Nk, if they are or not outliers, and H0 is saying they are not outliers. In a while, we'll be understanding it a little bit better with some examples. Okay, so for the non-high dimensional case, I'll be comparing the proposed test with the test from Wilks. Wilks set up a test in his paper from 1963 that is here, and it is also addressed in a book I published with Professor Barry Arnold some years ago, because it is not exactly a likelihood ratio test, but it is like a likelihood ratio test, where this A star, it is, let me start with this A matrix, it is exactly the same A matrix that was up there a while ago. And it is the overall matrix of that is the numerator of the MLE of sigma, actually. And so this A star, it is the MLE of sigma. A is for all the observations, and A star is only for those observations that are not being tested for outliers. And so then we can show that you can write lambda in this way, And then we can get from here the distribution of lambda as being a product of betas, and then we can address it in as much same way as we can address the distribution of the test we saw a while ago. And that approach is done in this book here also. And so we can show that we can easily get very sharp quantiles and p-values also for this lambda, that now here, this lambda is lambda for the test of Wilks. And so we can show from that the composition of lambda written in this way, we can show that it has the same distribution as a product of independent beta random variables that are these. And so from here, we can easily get the quantiles and the p-values. Okay, we can show that for even P or even Q, it has a finite form that is a generalized integer gamma distribution, which is shown there in that book. And for the other cases, we can build a near exact distribution. So we are all set to just go for the carrying out the tests, but we should have in mind, we should really keep in mind the observation that Wilks is doing in his paper, which is a very good one, that it is this one. If I set up some alpha for my test, let me go back, because the test I'm proposing here, it is a likelihood ratio test. And also this one from Wilks, it is not exactly, but it is almost, if we can say that, almost a likelihood ratio test. We should reject H null if the computed value is smaller than our alpha. But what happens here, it is I am actually choosing the k observations that I'll be testing for outliers from a set of n observations. And usually I do that by looking at the plot. But if I do that actually without noticing it, I am doing choose nk visual tests, say, between the points. And so I should not use my original alpha, but rather I should use a value that is my original alpha divided by choose nk, where n it is the number of overall points in my initial sample, and k it is the number of points that I'm really testing for outliers. Okay, and so this is just a questionnaire note. So let us see the two tests in a setup that is a non-high dimensional setup. And so I will be using the data from the table 610 of Johnson and Wicker. And so this is a table that has 36 observations for gasoline drugs that are supposedly doing the transportation of milk for farms. And so the three variables involved are the costs of fuel, repair, and capital. And so if you plot the 36 points in these three variables, we get this nice plot where I marked with these rectangles the points that maybe we can identify them as being possible candidates for outliers. Okay? And so in this plot of points that is represented again there, I'm doing a test of if the points 9 and 21 together, the two of them, I should consider them as being outliers or not. The Wilks test is giving the p-value that is there, 3.02 times 10 to the power -7, which is a very small one. And our test is giving an even smaller p-value. And so the cutting values it should be, if I'm using an alpha of 0.05, according to Wilks, I should use a limiting value that would be alpha over combinations of 36 points 2 by 2. And so doing that, I get this limiting value, or for alpha 0.01, this other value. And so we should consider the points as being outliers if the p-values are smaller than those values. And both of them are, with our test actually giving an even smaller p-value. And so it looks like that when the points are really outliers, our test is giving an even smaller p-value, indicating that it may have a bit of a larger power than Wilks test, actually. For the 2 points, 23, 36, they are much closer to the cloud of points. And so the test from Wilks and also our test, they give a quite large p-value that is not exceeding the limits there. And so the 2 points should not be considered as being outliers. Let us see the 2 points 4 and 18. Also 4 and 18, the p-value is rather large. And so we should not consider them as being outliers. And so the two tests, then they match quite well in these situations here. Let us see some other of the testing we can think about. In here, I was considering the 2 points being on the same side of the cutoff points, the two candidates for outliers. Now I'll be considering situations where each one of them is on a different side of the cutoff points. For example, 4 and 9. And so for 4 and 9, Wilks test is giving p-value that is there, and our test is giving that one there. And so the limit value should be those in that line there. We can see that the p-value for the Wilks test is not smaller than the limiting value, but the p-value for our test is really smaller. What means that our test is showing once again a larger power and would lead to the rejection of H0. And so if I reject H0, I should consider the 2 points as being outliers. Okay, for points 4 and 21, it happens that using either one of the two tests, we should not consider them, the 2 points 4 and 21, as being outliers. If I consider really testing for the 2 points at the same time. For point 9, only for this point here, 9, by itself, it should be considered as an outlier if we just use either one of the two tests. But once again, our test looks like having a larger power than Wilks' test, which is kind of a nice thing, because if that point is an outlier, we should get a very small value here. So I should reject H0, and I should assume that 0.9 is an outlier. For 21, what happens is the two values are a bit similar, the two values for the p-value, and any of them, it is larger than the values for the limits there. And so the 21 by itself should not be considered as an outlier, which is matching, because also 4 by itself should not be considered as being an outlier. And so the two of them together should not be considered as being outliers. And so everything is matching. It looks like that the test that I'm proposing here has, in some situations, a larger power than Wilks' test, mainly in situations where we should reject the null hypothesis, and we should then consider the points as being outliers, which is a nice thing. So let us go now for a high-dimensional case. That is a situation where the number of variables is larger than the number of observations. And I'll be using a data set that is available in this website here. And so that is a data set on 252 men, and it has a number of variables available, among which the circumference of the neck, the chest, abdomen, hip, thigh, knee, ankle, biceps, forearm, and wrist. And so I'll be using all these variables. They are actually in a number of, and so my P, the number of variables will be 10, okay? And I'll be using only some observations that I chose to carry out some nice testing around. And so from that file, that has 252 observations, I'll be using observations 1, 2, 3, 39, 41, 50, and 182. I plotted them here using 3 of these variables. And so I'm using, in this first plot, I'm using the neck, chest, and abdomen. In second plot, I'm using hip, thigh, and knee. And in the third plot, I'm using ankle, biceps, and the forearm. And I don't have a plot for a wrist. But which is very much interesting, it is that in all 3 plots, setup of the points is very similar. Nearby the center of the cloud of points, we just have points 1, 2, 3, and then on one side 41 and 39, always on that side, and then 50 and 182 down on the other side. And so this is a very nice setup to really carry out some of the testing. So, okay, the plots are a bit more visible here. And so we can see those two on one side, the three of them in the center, the other two on the other side. And so the three plots have a similar aspect regarding these points, sometimes with 41 getting a bit closer to the center, as it happens here. So let us see some of the testing we can do. So I'll be testing 39 and 41, those two against all those. And so what happens it is we get a very, very small p-value, much smaller than the limits there. It means we should consider 39 and 41 as being outliers in a cloud of points that has all those 7 points. Okay, what happens if I test 39 and 41 only against 1, 2, 3? It means I am only considering these 5 points now. I'm forgetting those two. And considering only these 5, should I consider 39 and 41 as being outliers? And the answer is yes. The p-value is yet very small, much smaller than the limits there. And so I should consider the 2 points as being outliers in a cloud with these 5 points here. What happens with 50 and 182? Those two against the overall cloud of points. And so if I consider all them, the 2 points there, they pull away the cloud, and so the variance will be very large. And so these two are not so far away from the overall cloud. And actually 50 and 182 against all other, the p-value is quite large, much larger than the limits there. And so I should not consider them as big outliers. But what happens if I consider 50 and 182 only versus 1, 2, 3? It means what happens if I consider only these 5 points? Well, what happens it is the p-value is now a little bit, just a little bit lower than the limit value for alpha equals 0.05. And so if I use alpha equals 0.05, I should consider them as being outliers, although the difference is very, very slim. But if I use alpha equals 0.01, I should not consider them as being outliers. And so they are, say, if you can say it, a little bit outliers, but not so much. And what happens if I consider 4 points, 41, 39, and 50, and 182 against the other 3 points there? Okay, what happens it is I get a p-value again very, very, very small, and so smaller than limits there. And so I should say that in a cloud of 7 points, those 4 together, they should be considered as being outliers, which makes really some sense because the other 3 are very close to the origin. And what happens if I consider 39 against all other points? 39 against all other, I am including 41. 41 is rather close to 39. I got only this plot, but I got another plot here and another plot. And so you can see that 39 is a bit far away there, a bit not so far away here, a bit closer there. And so if I'm including 41 as being this cloud of points only against 39, we lose a bit of power, but still it should be considered as being an outlier, really. Okay. And what about 39 versus 1, 2, 3? 39 versus all these. Okay, now it is a much larger, a much smaller p-value. And so we should reject with a much larger power, because what happens it is this is much far away from 1, 2, 3. And so it looks like everything is working in a sensible way. And so it looks like this is a good option for an outlier test for the high dimensional case, because we can use it either in the high dimensional or in the non-high dimensional. In the non-high dimensional case, we get a nice power when we should reject H0. And here it looks like everything is working in a much sensible way. We can also do the test of a 41 versus 1, 2, 3, 41 versus 1, 2, 3, 41 should be clearly considered as being an outlier. 50 versus all other, it should not be considered an outlier. The p-value is very large, almost 1. And so 50 against all other, but it is including 182, and so 50 is well inside the cloud of points. And so clearly, it should not be an outlier. What about 50 versus 1, 2, 3? Then, okay, we get a smaller value than the limit value for alpha equals 0.05, but it is larger than for alpha equals 0.01. And so it is, say, a little bit of an outlier, 50 against 1, 2, 3. And so it makes sense. What about 182 versus 1, 2, 3? We get a smaller p-value than for 50, which is accessible. This is a bit further from this than 50 is. And so it should be considered an outlier for both alpha equals 0.05 and 0.01. Because what happens then if I test one point on each side of the cloud of points? For example, 39 and 182. What happens if I test this one and this one as being outliers against all other points? What happens it is I get a p-value that, although it is not so large, it is actually larger than the two p-values for alpha equals 0.05 and 0.01. And so it means I should not consider the 2 points as being outliers. But what happens if I test, because in that cloud I got 41 and 50 that are actually doing the stretching of the cloud of points. And so that is why I should not consider these two as being outliers. But what happens if I test 39 and 182, this one and that one, only against 1, 2, 3? Okay, then the p-value is very small, and I should consider them as being outliers. It means 39 and 182 against the 3 points in the center, they are very clear outliers, okay? And a similar thing happens if I use 39 and 50, okay? 50 is rather close to 182 all time in all plots, as you can see there. And so it looks like the test is working in a very much sensible way, and it works rather well for this setup of the high-dimensional case, and it worked also quite well in the setup of the non-high-dimensional case. So that was it, and really thanks for listening. And if you have any further questions or comments, please feel free.